Children's songs he loves to hear, so raise your voices high and clear, and you may praise the Lord. You may praise the Lord. Till the Lord is in his temple, in the power of his word. Come with gratitude adoring, come ye children, praise the Lord. Sing, little children, sing, hail your Savior King. Children's songs he loves to hear, so raise your voices high and clear. You may praise the Lord. You may praise the Lord.
The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. Please be seated. May the following words of the Lord provide hope and perspective for today. Reading first from Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hedged me behind and before. You laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain to it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall upon me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. And reading from the Doctrine of Charity, 158. When a person sincerely, justly, and faithfully does the work that belongs to his office or employment from affection and its delight, he's continually doing the good things of useful service, not only for the community or public, but also for individuals and private citizens. But this cannot be unless he looks to the Lord and shuns evils as sins. For to look to the Lord and shun evils as sins is the first of charity. The second of charity is to do good things. And the good things that he does are good things of useful service, which he does every day, and which, when he's not doing, he thinks of doing. There's an interior affection which inwardly remains and desires it. So it is that he's perpetually doing the good things of useful service, from morning to evening, from year to year, from his earliest age to the end of his life. A reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And reading from Spiritual Experiences, 1336. Someone driven to despair by melancholy in his bodily life was pushed by devilish spirits to the point of killing himself. He came to me complaining that he was being treated miserably by evil spirits, and saying that he was in the midst of the Furies who constantly provoked him. The place was seen where he was, namely in the lower earth a little to the left. I also saw that he continued to try to end his life. He was struggling terribly against this inclination, but in vain. From Isaiah chapter 9. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. And reading from Arcana Celestia, 840. The words in Genesis, God remembered, means his being merciful. This is attributed to the Lord, especially when temptation is past, because at that time, new light is shining. As long as temptation lasts, a person assumes that the Lord is not present, or he's being harassed by evil genii, so harassed, in fact, that sometimes he has so great a feeling of hopelessness as scarcely to believe in the existence of any God at all. Yet at such times, the Lord is more present than the person can possibly believe. And then reading two passages from conjugal love. There is a truly conjugal love, which today is so rare that people do not know what it's like, and scarcely that it exists. The possibility of this kind of conjugal love may be indeed recognized from the first state of that love, when it's first sealing into and entering the heart of a young man and woman, as it does in the case of those who are beginning to love only one of the opposite sex and want him or her to be their betrothed. Who does not then acknowledge and give assent to the following thoughts, that this love is the fundamental love of all loves, moreover, that all joys and all delights have been gathered into it, from the first to the last. The sphere of the love for little children is a sphere of protecting and maintaining those who cannot protect and maintain themselves. The working out of the Lord's purposes by means of the spheres emanating from him are divine providence. This providence is also meant, therefore, as a sphere of protecting and maintaining those who cannot protect and maintain themselves. For it exists from creation that things created must be preserved, safeguarded, protected, and maintained. Otherwise, the universe would fall to ruin. But because this cannot be done by the Lord directly in the case of living beings, to whom he has bequeathed free judgment, it is up to those that he guides. And finally, reading from Micah chapter 6. What does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? Amen. Here ends the readings from the Word. Blessed are they who hear the Word of God and keep it. Amen.
our song shall rise to thee. Holy, 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 merciful and mighty, Father and Savior, glory be to thee. Holy, 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 all saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns all round the glassy sea. Cherubim and seraphim, falling down before thee, thou wast and art, and evermore shall be. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, all the earth shall praise thy name, in earth and sky and sea. Holy, 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 merciful and mighty, Father and Savior, glory be to thee.
Please be seated. How can we judge the measure of a person's life? What is it that the Lord calls us to do with the time we have in this world? He calls us to do what is just, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with Him. He said, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." Greatness in the Lord's eyes is measured by how a person's love and wisdom expresses itself in daily life. It's the Lord's will that each of us be born into this natural world with its finite limits of time, energy, and other resources. It's His will that we spend our time here defining the values that will be the core of our lives. Day in and day out, we make hundreds, even thousands of decisions about what to focus on, what to think, do, and say. Through these decisions and how we respond to our inner battles, we form the person that we will be to eternity. Truly, all religion has to do with life. The life of our heart, the life of our thoughts, the life of our words and deeds. We're gathered to reflect on the life of Karl Smith. From childhood through adolescence, through young adulthood, up through his 40-plus years in this world, Karl's life had its joys and sadnesses, its high ideals and its darker elements, qualities of giving and serving others, and too often of not wanting to receive in return. There's been an outpouring of appreciation of good qualities seen by those who knew him, and there are other qualities that bring deep concern, distress, and sadness. Karl Blair Smith was born in Glenview, Illinois, August 21st, 1976, to Duncan and Sylvia Smith. He was in the middle of a large family, mostly boys. He was the sixth of 10 children, with 4 older brothers and 1 older sister, 3 younger brothers and 1 younger sister. Karl's oldest brother was less than 7 years older than him, and his youngest sister was less than 7 years younger. Within a noisy, rough and tumble household, Karl was often in the background, a relatively sensitive and quiet presence much of the time. Quiet except for his laugh, but more on that later. The home he grew up in cared deeply about the new church. There was regular family worship at home, and attending Sunday worship was a given. Karl's father read from the heavenly doctrine to his wife each morning throughout their married life. His father continued to read to himself after her death, apparently reading through all 30 volumes more than 3 times. In the church community Karl grew up in, though not large, there were playgrounds, woods, fields, and a small pond for play during the summer and skating during the winter. Having his mother pass away when he was 15 left a hole in the family life, and perhaps made it more difficult for Karl to come to an adult understanding of his parents' marriage. In addition to his own home, Karl found some families in the church community that he enjoyed visiting, and some listening ears for his thoughts, concerns, and reflections. Karl attended the Emmanuel Church School, now known as the Glenview New Church School, kindergarten through 8th grade, and then 9th and 10th grades at the Midwestern Academy. When he started 1st grade, there was one other boy in his class, but it grew over the following years. In his 10th grade at the Midwestern Academy, he was one of 4 students in 2 grades. Karl went on to attend the Academy of the New Church Secondary Schools, graduating in 1995. His senior year, he was the song leader for the Phi Alpha, the boys' dormitory fraternity. Starting when Karl was about 15, he worked when he could at a small company owned by a couple in the Glenview New Church. The company did heating, ventilation, and air conditioning work, or HVAC. Summer, school breaks, and any time he was in town, he would help out. After high school, he took some classes for HVAC at the local community college, as well as some other classes that the company owner sent him to. In his early 20s, Karl moved east to be near this congregation, working for a time at another HVAC company, and then starting his own company, borrowing part of its name from his first employer, Effective Heating, Plumbing, and Air. Although working very long hours and showing incredible craftsmanship, the business struggled because Karl would undercharge in unsustainable ways. And most recently, he's been working for another HVAC company. One of the defining characteristics of Karl's daily actions for many people was his generous efforts to serve others. This showed up in his helpfulness as a child. At the Academy, Karl received a service award and a standing ovation from the student body. He would work long hours with little or no expected payment for family and extended family. Although not an early riser, he would get in long hours of work, often going into the night, even late into the night. At some point when he lived in the Kempton area, he was inspired with the idea of building a 10 to 12 foot tall trebuchet for the Glencairn Museum's Children's Medieval Summer Camp. He had to talk the director into the idea. It was the highlight of the end of the day for many of the boys particularly, as it flung a watermelon impressive distances. Another defining characteristic, one that came up when I first started talking with his siblings, was his laughter. A childhood friend remembered Karl laughing so hard at cartoons as when Wile E. Coyote once again ran off a cliff that it was hard not to laugh himself. Another remembered him as a fun-loving goofball. Anyone who saw him dance found it memorable. In family conversations at home, he would be quietly sitting in the background until something was said that would start him laughing, turning red, wheezing, and evoking laughter in others. One man cited a situation a number of years ago in which their family well died in the middle of winter. Given 2 infants at the home, this was a significant problem. The man wrote, Karl came over and quickly determined that the pump was buried under the driveway. Typical Karl, he laughed, shook his head, and got to work digging through frozen earth compacted by 20 years of traffic. He worked like crazy. I suspect he undercharged me. Another characteristic that showed up early in his life was a commitment to and longing for marriage. He started looking for the right future partner with unrealistic idealism while still in elementary school. One person observed in his high school yearbook, he wrote that his ambition in life was to love his wife. That was all he wanted. No fame, no fortune, just one thing that maybe some of us take for granted sometimes. Karl's approach to marriage was somewhat like the chivalrous relationship we're told of with knights and their ladies. He would focus on a young woman and quietly from a distance envision a future relationship. And then she'd get married to someone else. Perhaps with no idea that Karl had held any other hopes. Karl had always envisioned that his life would include marriage and family. Truth be told, Karl had a very complicated relationship with his father. His father had problems with alcohol, with anger, and a limited ability to talk through conflicts to a healthy resolution. One of Karl's siblings suggested that his father was hard on Karl's sensitivity because of the abuse he himself had experienced, partially because of a similar quiet sensitivity had not helped him better defend himself. Karl sadly was estranged from his father and the family living in Glenview for 15 years. Perhaps there can be a good resolution of this disconnectedness with his father sometime in the next life. Sometime starting in his teenage years, Karl adopted something of a new church militant outlook on life. He adopted more and more of a division in life between who were the good people and who weren't. In a very idealistic way, he would see things in black and white. It had disappointed him in early acquaintances over and over again. When a female cousin first started wearing makeup, he was disappointed in it. For a time in Glenview, he would don camouflage clothing and patrol the church grounds at night to help ensure appropriate behavior was occurring, even though there was an established adult park patrol. At one time, Karl heroically saved the life of a man whose car had flipped over and was upside down in 6 feet of water. Karl drove down, broke a window, pulled the man out of the water, phoned 911, and left, partially because he was almost regretful to discover he had saved a drunk driver. He wore dog tags with code names for himself and phrases like, "My life is to protect. Love your wife every day, never take her for granted. And be strong and courageous, do not be afraid." Sadly, one of the things the Lord has forewarned us in the teachings for the new church is how devious and destructive evil spirits can be by twisting things that are in themselves good. One person suggested that Karl's demons got him in parts of life he cared the most about. Some of his states of mind recently might be indicated by the places in his Bible that had bookmarks in it. There was a bookmark on the page that included the distressing spirit troubling Saul. There was one that reminds us, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those against us." There's one in the New Testament where Jesus speaks of defilement coming from within, and one in the Gospel of Matthew where it states, "Whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depths of the sea." In his world of many high ideals and his significant failures to live up to some of the ones that have been so important to him, it's not hard to picture Karl feeling hopeless and even like he deserved to be punished. That hopelessness and sense of punishment for guilt is a hallmark of the work of evil spirits. They inspire evil loves and false ideas, and then they accuse and condemn us for them. Many of us have faced dark periods of our lives and yet moved through them as best we could, hopefully seeking the Lord's help, and have found that there was light on the other side. Perhaps if Karl had drawn more of a sense of being a worthwhile person in himself from his earlier years, he might have had a very different path. Perhaps if he hadn't grown up with such values of self-reliance, he might have turned to others for help. Perhaps if he hadn't spent so much time alone, interactions with others might help bring more of the light of heaven in the dark times of his mind. Whatever its source, the way Karl's life ended was wrong. Not better for others, and not likely better for himself. And it won't itself solve the problems that likely contributed to a sense of hopelessness. But we need to remember a powerful teaching of the new church. The Lord says, "Judge not that you be not condemned." This cannot in the least mean judging of someone's moral and civil life in the world, but judging of someone's spiritual and heavenly life. Who does not see that if people were not allowed to judge in the moral life of those belonging with them in the world, society would collapse? What would become of society if there were no public courts of law, and if no one was permitted to have his judgment of another? But to judge what the inner mind or soul is like within, thus what a person's spiritual state is, and so is fate after death, of this one is not permitted to judge, because it's known to the Lord alone. Nor does the Lord reveal it until after death, in order that everyone may do what he does in freedom, and that good or evil may consequently be from him and so in him, and the person thus live his own life and be his own person to eternity. As we think of Karl's life being renewed in the world of spirits, may we envision how the wise and loving angels will help to shed light on the pathway of his life. Let us hope that they can help him see and really accept the ways that the Lord has helped him to do useful things, and to value this role in his life as a gift to be deeply grateful for. Let us hope that the Lord can draw from some of the good and true motivation in his life the ability to reject the motivations, thoughts, and choices that hell could inspire. It can be our prayer that Karl might become that loving and committed angel husband he had long envisioned. Let us remember, the Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. Amen. Let us pray. Lord, draw near to us and send angels of hope and comfort. Help us to reflect on the qualities that we saw in Karl that showed some of your light, some of your desire to serve. May those be more and more the core of who he was. We know, Lord, that you're working with him right now. Help us to know that the best and wisest angels will help with his waking and help with his steps forward. Bless us with the hope that he's left in the world. Help us, Lord, to each follow you better in our own lives. And now, Lord, hear the prayer that you taught us. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so on the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom,
and power, and glory forever. Amen.
O Lord, forgive us our trespasses,
As we forgive those who trespass against us.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Please rise.
Salvation, peace the fruit of conquered sin, peace the sweet and will, peace the worldly minds unknown, peace that floweth as a cheer us, let thy blessed kingdom come, with all thy revelation, which we so long have sought. Come with deepest consolation, peace of God, which passes